I'm Cynthia Myers-Morrison, and I am a webinar chair for foodaddictioninstitute.org, and welcome you. My co-chair for webinars is here also, David Wolfe, and he's in a different capacity today, and we'll talk about that in just a moment. And Judy Wolfe, who happens to be the mother of David Wolfe. So this is a family affair today, and what is it that we can learn from food addiction, past and present, to bring into our lives to help our children grow up healthier, stronger, and free from food addiction, independent of whether they had parents that were addicts or not. So we'll start. I want to introduce Judy first, and Judy Wolfe is a certified food addiction counselor, and she helps people achieve peace and serenity with their food, weight, and body image. Judy's passion and commitment to this work comes both from her professional studies and her personal success in keeping over 125 pounds off of her body for more than 15 years. Judy has helped hundreds of individuals in the US and abroad to understand not only the nature of food addiction, but also, and most importantly, the way to recover from it. Judy's practical, no-nonsense, and action-oriented approach helps those she serves. She is an active member of the Food Addiction Institute and chairs the Food Addiction Research Program. She works with food addiction informed dietitian and others as needed. She's prior to this becoming a certified food addiction counselor, Judy was a physical therapist and a registered respiratory therapist. She has a Bachelor's of Science degree in physical therapy with high honors from Northeastern University and a certificate in respiratory therapy from the University of Chicago Hospitals and Clinics. And I welcome you, Judy, to our talk today. And I'll go on to introduce David Wolfe also. Dave is a registered dietitian, food addiction counselor, and chef. And Dave of Rom Wolfe is dedicated to helping individuals eliminate their food cravings and heal their minds and bodies from the wounds of addiction. Dave is trained by and remains a protege of Bitten Johnson, RN, Sweden's sugar addiction expert. He has also become one of the administrators for the Facebook group Sugar Bomb in Your Brain with Bitten. He has also worked closely with Dr. Vera Tarman, Esther Helga Gudmundsdottir, Phil Werdell, Amanda Leith, and Martha Pierce. Sugar addiction scars the body and the brain. David utilizes the principles of biochemical repair and orthomolecular medicine to heal the body from the inside out. He is versed in low carbohydrate, high fat keto, and has successfully treated both sugar addiction and volume addiction. David has experience working with individuals who have undergone bariatric surgery and specializes in working with food, sugar addicted post-operative patients. He believes everyone has the potential to recover and that the only initial tool needed is a willingness to end the abusive relationship with food. David founded triggerfreenutrition.com in 2017 and treats sugar and food addicts both in person and through phone and video counseling. David is also, as I mentioned, the co-chair for FAI website committee and a welcome addition to our activity here today. So Food Addiction Institute welcomes you, welcomes Dave and Judy. And first I'll have each of them speak for about 5 to 10 minutes about their own experiences with food addiction from their various perspectives. They have several, each of them. And then we'll go on to address particular questions. So Judy, yours first. Thank you.
Hey, so I'm Judy, and I am definitely a food addict, and I am also what I would call a compulsive overeater, meaning that I have a behavioral problem that I always want more. When I finish a meal, I am so sad. I can't even tell you when I take my last bite. But I do know today that if I wait 10, 20 minutes, that goes away and I can go 4, 6, 8, 10, 12 hours. Not that I recommend that, but I can go for a very long time without eating. But I never would think that at the end of a meal, let me tell you. I don't remember ever being thin. I don't remember ever having a normal relationship with food growing up. I can remember being on going to the doctor very young, very young. And I can remember being on a formal program of, dieting when I was in 7th grade, I think. So, and that's a long time ago. I didn't know what I didn't know. I thought that I just was a failure. I was a failure, that I could not diet well. I couldn't do anything. I couldn't follow directions. And so, of course, I always thought that it was a moral issue, that I was good or bad. And I know today that's not the problem. I was being treated inappropriately by my physicians and by people because they wanted me to moderate my food. They wanted me to consume products that my body, unfortunately, just like an alcoholic, is a distillery to sugar, grains, flours, starches, and alcohol. And if I consume any one of those products, I can't stop. The only bite I have control over, I believe, is the very first one that I take. And after that, that bite's going to take me out. And it has nothing to do with being good or bad. It has to do with, I believe, with my education now and all, and understanding that I have a primary disease, that this is a disease, just like cancer, multiple sclerosis, you name it. That's what I have, but I have the disease of addiction. And my outlet for that is food. That's my first choice. And also my behavioral addiction is more. Now, apples don't fall far from trees. I have to tell you that I have a family filled with food addicts. So I believe genetically I was sensitized, that I carry some kind of, that whether it would show up at some point in my life. And for me, it showed up very young. I don't feel I had a traumatic life. I had loving parents. I had brothers that I all speak to today. I won't say we're the closest family, but we have no differences. We accept each other for who we are. I just want to say that I found my solution around 1990 is when I started searching, where I found a solution. And my children, David was about 3.5. My daughter, is 3.5 years older, so around 7. I'm just giving you a ballpark figure. And that's when I figured out that I had a problem. I didn't know I was an addict then, but I knew I had a problem with food. So I happened to go to a 12-step program, and I found the way for me to lose. I lost, like 100 pounds. And then within a couple of years, I took an 80-pound bite back. I didn't know, this is a process. I didn't know, again, what I didn't know. I later found out when I went to another program in 2004, and I got clean in 2005. April 30th is a day that sticks in my mind, the day before I was eating my brains out. And then that day, for whatever reason, I had my last, so to speak, what we call a day one. I had the last day that I ingested sugar, flours, grains, starches, and alcohol. And I have peace around that today because I'm not craving anything. I'm not obsessing about food, and I don't crave. I'm not going to tell you that when I'm out and about and, there's a cinnamon bun factory and I smell that it doesn't say, ooh, wouldn't that be nice? I mean, it triggers a whole slew of memories, but I don't choose. That's the difference today. I can make my own decisions, and I can make choices today that support my recovery, versus before all I could do was go for my next fix. And since this is a family thing, I'll just say that definitely got in the way of raising my children. I mean, quite frankly, when my kids were quite young, I wanted to have bags and boxes around me, lie on the couch, read a good book, and, not necessarily give my kids the care they deserved. My husband would be the one to go out, on a toboggan or sled or outside in the snow or out in the garden. And that was not my thing, And it is interesting to say that once I put the food down for me, that changed. I was way more available for my children. I could be much more present. And I think that had, which I'm sure David can speak to and we can talk about later, I was able to be available and present in their life to really be there for them. Was I a perfect mom? Absolutely not. I made mistakes, but I'm very grateful today that I have 2 adult children, both have babies, both have spouses, and that I get along with all of them because I don't have to control, I don't have to manipulate, I don't have to tell them what to do. And, that's a beautiful thing for somebody who was a control freak, because I was. And one of the things you had asked about before was, what about withdrawal? Well, I was irritable, discontent. I got angry way quicker than I would today. I wanted my fix. Get out of my way. I wanted what I wanted. And yeah, I suffered from headaches and withdrawal. I just had some days where I needed like what we call a bedroom slipper day, where I just had to be really low key, take care of myself, not worry about anyone else. To some degree, because when you have young kids, you can't quite do that. But, I had to get the support of my husband involved. I needed to go to meetings. And I told you, I took an 80-pound bite, and it took me years to figure out what the problem was, which was the grain for me and the starches. I had to give that up, and I have to personally weigh and measure all my food because I have that behavioral process of more. And I know my husband resented my going to meetings. I always went to meetings, even when I was eating, but it was not a picnic for me. I was doing that to try to get sober, to try to get abstinent. And thank goodness he was willing to be there to help me. And it worked. It worked because he got a better wife in the process, a way better spouse in the process. So, this is a disease. Addiction, food addiction is a disease that honestly, when I take the first bite, the best way for me to describe it is I feel like a piece of doo-doo and I can't function because then all I'm thinking about is my next fix. And I end up in the rabbit hole, spiraling down into a rabbit hole, and I can't be the Judy that I want to be. And I don't want to go back there. So that's why I do what I do. I'm vigilant. And I know I'm low bottom, what I call low bottom, high maintenance food addict. And if I can do what I do, knowing where, I didn't tell you this, I dieted my way all my life to 288 pounds. So can you imagine if I wasn't on a diet, I would probably weigh 1,000 pounds and be dead. And that's where I would be today if I wasn't doing what I do, being vigilant. And you know what? This is the best my life could possibly be because no one's making choices for me. No one's telling me what to do. I can do that for myself. And that is a miracle today. So thank you for letting me share, and you'll see what will come from this. I can't wait to hear David.
Yeah, that's awesome, Mom. I guess I'll start in the beginning. I think that makes the most sense.
Thank you.
First of all, my name's Dave, and I'm a sugar addict, and I need to tell myself that every day because the disease doesn't want me to know that, So I tell myself that, and often I tell other people that because that's important to me. So what's interesting is that I was actually helping other addicts before I was helping myself. So, because that's just how it happened. I guess I didn't really identify myself as an addict until I was in a training in Iceland, and then the woman running it, who Cindy mentioned, Esther Helga, said, "You're probably an early stage food addict." And at that point, I said, "Yeah, you're probably right." I couldn't really refute it. If I look back on my life and look at the patterns, it was probably in my mid-20s, I would get home from work and beeline to the pantry and find some sort of carbohydrate. I would get home from school as a kid and like eat like 5 or 6 packs of gummy bears and like hide the wrappers. I would throw wrappers in the garbage, but like beneath other things, so they wouldn't be so obvious that they were there. Yeah, all those things. And that's not normal behavior, but for some reason it didn't register. We were talking about a lot of things before we actually started recording, so that was definitely one of them, like the hiding and I remember an episode of being at a mall and being hungry, and so I stole like a sugary snack. And then they saw me steal, and they were like, they told my mom, "You need to pay for this because your son took it." Like, that's, looking back, I wasn't just being a mischievous kid. I needed a fix. So, as far as being a dad now, and then kind of using that experience to look back as myself as a kid too. So the house was pretty chaotic when the addiction was active. It wasn't like that bad, but it definitely wasn't at baseline. I remember it affecting everyone. I remember my dad being really good about staying out of it, and he would kind of direct us to stay out of it, like stay out of the way, don't make stupid comments, don't talk about it. Because we knew what happens when my mom made pizza, because like she would change. And so we didn't want her to do that. And so we would try to get her to not do that, which I eventually found out was, a codependent behavior, but it was a survival mechanism, right? We didn't want the house to be chaotic. So we definitely saw the connection. I don't think it made sense until I was much older, but yeah, we definitely saw the connection. And I don't necessarily remember my mom not being an active parent, but I do remember like the mood swings and the irritability, and now as I identify as an addict, I can relate to that, like the withdrawal process. You don't want to be around someone in withdrawal. It's not fun, because they're a bear, really, and they're almost forcing themselves to do this thing that they don't really want to do. Like, they don't want necessarily to give it up, or they don't want to lose the effect that the food has on them, but they do based on the consequences. So I can, it's not fun to be around, and sure, as we go through in and out of that process, whether we go back to the food or not, the brain kind of learns and gets more adept at getting what it wants, and therefore, there's a tolerance cycle. And I experienced that. I can tell you that I've given up bread. I'm a trained artisan bread baker, so it was that important for me to like give up one of the things that was most important to me. And like I was administrating a Facebook group for artisan bread bakers around the world. There were like 7,000 of us. And I said, I can't do this anymore. Like, I can't have this around, because it wasn't working. And so I had to change my life. Like, I had to change the way I socially interacted with other people. There were situations in the beginning that I had to avoid, people I had to avoid, things I had to do differently. Definitely one of the biggest things that I've been able to accomplish is coming off of stimulants that I was prescribed for attention deficit hyperactive disorder, ADHD. Definitely the poster child for ADD. I think that the meds were really helpful for me. I learned how to learn while on these medications, and they did support that. But later in life, I found that they weren't supporting me. They were still working, but they weren't supporting me and my goals. So I did withdraw from those also, and that was a major challenge that I did during my recovery. The tools that I had learned that I used when I gave up sugar and bread and flour and grains were helpful to me, but still it was a really rough road. In fact, I was so depressed that I didn't know I was depressed until I wasn't depressed. It was like one day I woke up and I was like almost okay again, but it wasn't. It just took a long time to get there, and we hear that a lot with food addicts and also substance related addicts. And so that was more or less my story. What started was that I was telling people how to eat, and then I had lost my job, and I wanted to do something like better with my life. And so I got involved with other people that were in recovery, and I decided to do what they did. And I followed some directions. I took some actions I really didn't want to do, but I'm really happy with the results. Today, I'm comfortable in my own skin. I can be places I don't want to be. Like, I never really liked crowds. Crowds don't bother me. None of that. It was almost like it was a manifestation of my disease. It was like, let me be uncomfortable so that I can get something, so I can be a little more comfortable. And that was the drug. And so once I kind of processed through that and got rid of all of the baggage I was carrying around with me my whole life, I can pretty much like handle anything. I mean, today it's just a matter of just kind of like grounding myself in the day, and whatever life has, I can pretty much handle so far anyway. I always tell people, like, if I do today all the things that I did yesterday to stay clean or sober or absent or whatever you want to call it, there's a pretty good chance that it's going to happen if I do all those actions. If I'm not willing to do those actions, it's a big question mark, so that's how I live my life today. I just do the things I did yesterday because they worked then and they'll probably work now. So the only other thing I'll kind of add is, and this may kind of lead into the more conversational part of this session, is as a dad, it's definitely hard, right? Because I'm definitely like an active decision maker in terms of food, and I do the shopping and all that, but there's so many variables involved in what a child eats, I know that for myself, I have to find a balance, right? Because like there are certain like hot button topics for me that, like, if I get involved with them, my like serenity like goes out the window, like that. So like food, diet, that's like one of them. And so I have to be really careful about like what kind of suggestions I make. And we've had a lot of open conversations, myself and my partner Kelly, about it, and we do the best we can, but we're not I certainly, my daughter certainly doesn't eat like I do. There's definitely some differences. But as of yet, I'm not yet to see any signs. She actually like doesn't like sweets at all. She's just like kind of sticks her tongue out. But so far so good on that front. But it's definitely a challenge, because when we're in relationships, you have two people involved, and you have to find what works. And sometimes, like my mom was talking about, sometimes it takes a long time. Other people just go ahead and find a program that works for them, and then they're good, so that's it out of me for now, at least. And I think a lot more of the intricate questions will come out in the next section.
Thank you. I am really pleased to hear both of you, each of you, talk about the things that mattered to you in your history. So now what I'd like to invite the two of you to do for a period of time, about 20 minutes, to talk with each other about your experiences, your recollections, the things that you observed when David was young, when Judy was new in abstinence, and as things have changed over the years, and then watching David be new in abstinence, and how your studies have been intertwined in that, because each of you has studied extensively breads on the one hand, and then food addiction for both of you. So if you'd like to start, Judy, with what your experiences that you remember, want to talk about, and you think might be helpful to parents. Thank you.
I can say that, again, I start out with this, you know, it's repetitive, but I didn't know what I didn't know. Like, I had no idea that both of my children, and my daughter says it's okay for me to talk about her, but both of my children are food addicts of some kind, or sugar addicts, whatever you want to call yourself, but have issues with food. And I can tell you, when David was growing up, the only thing he liked, and he would tell you this, is anything that was beige. You know, it consisted of, I mean, he literally lived on apple juice, and he lived on macaroni and cheese and anything like that. And I can tell you, as a mom, you know, I knew I was versed in the standard American diet, which of course today I don't agree with. I don't partake in a lot of that. It's very different for me today. And what I would feed my children today is very different than what I did then. But I always served a salad, a vegetable, a starch, and protein with a meal. And if the meal was made up of more like starchy stuff, it still always had vegetables, you know, and salad, etc. So I actually served pretty healthfully because I knew a lot about food. David and I are foodies. We love to feed people. I think we got that. I mean, he'll say he got it from me and my mom, and my father's mother was also a cook in the old country. So, I mean, there's a long-standing relationship with food ethnically. There's no question about it. You know, abundance. Nobody ever lacked. My daughter, you know, because I'll share that too, I didn't know she had a problem with food. I had no idea. She would leave something on her plate, and I think to myself, how can she do that? Because I could never do that. You know, if something was on the counter, I'd want a sliver, a slice, a slab, and it would be gone. It would not last. You know, in my abstinence, it can last for days. I don't really care. It's not my food. It's like it has the crossbones on it of poison. You know, I won't touch that stuff. But she went to a program overseas, and for a summer, you know, and she came back a different size than when she had left. So I feel like that's probably got precipitated. Like, she has the genetic predisposition, but I think she was under a lot of stress, and things happened because terrorist situations, somebody, you know, passed away during an attack that she knew, and it was very traumatic. And so when she came home, she couldn't fit into any of her clothes. So little did I know, you know, and she now has 10 years of recovery. So she is a self-proclaimed food addict also. I don't know. I feel like I lost my train of thought of what you wanted, Cynthia, or Cindy. So what else do you want to hear? Because I'm like, went out my head.
Well, maybe a time for Dave to talk about.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks, Judy.
Yeah, so I mean, I know when my mom was on, because there was a restaurant where we live in Worcester in Massachusetts, which has now closed, but it was called Eddie's Pub. And when she was on, she used to get this dish. It was baked haddock was called Baked Haddock European, and it had vegetables on top, and then it was baked, like sliced peppers and onions and tomatoes, like cherry tomatoes cut in half, right, and baked. And normally it would have breadcrumbs in it, but she would say, I'm allergic to this, don't put this in it. And so that was what she did when we ate out. When she didn't do that, she partook in a large veggie pizza. So like, I remember that was like the difference. Did she have the baked fish or did she have the pizza, right? And so that was like one of the tips I knew. That's just one of the memories I have. Definitely, I can tell you this story. I was a bread baker. I had made a German bread called a Stollen. So what a Stollen is it's a very enriched bread, and then it's made with fruit that's been macerated in rum. So the dough is like buttery, like a croissant. It's very rich. But then what you do to preserve the bread is you bake it, and then you dunk it in butter. Like it's submerged in butter. And then you let it drip dry, and then you roll it in what's called donut sugar. And so what donut sugar is like really, really, really fine powdered sugar. So it's like finer than powdered sugar. And you do this like 3, 4, 5 times. And then you wrap it in plastic, and it sits for like months, and it's preserved because it's encased in fat and sugar. And so one of the members in my family ate the whole thing in a sitting. And that was like as a bread baker, like I was so wounded by that. But today it's just like, it's just another food addict going on a bender, and I can't imagine the amount of shame that they felt when that happened, because that's what happens. We have guilt and remorse after we use. And so that's just like a couple of the stories I remember about as a kid. And I can't even imagine what a kid, feels like. I feel like for me, while I was on stimulants, my appetite was so suppressed because I was like literally on amphetamines. So, my weight was always in check. I don't know that my weight would have been in check for my childhood had it not. There was definitely a period of time where I was like, I had grown out before growing up. So we were looking to getting like really short in length, husky pants and things like that. But I never really identified with having a weight problem. It's not one of the symptoms that I had. And I think that's important, that we look at weight like it's a symptom, not like it's a problem, like it's secondary to the disease, right? So it's the addiction causes weight gain. It's not that the weight gain is the problem. It's a symptom of the problem. And like Judy was mentioning, that the addiction is a primary illness. So it's like, it's there first, and then the other things come about later, whether that's weight or whether it's diabetes or heart disease or hypertension or kidney disease or retinopathy or losing toes or whatever it is. It's all secondary, right, to the primary illness, which is caused by our drugging with food. I guess I'll break there and see what happens.
Thank you both. In terms of looking at how do you look at now, from all of the education that you've garnered in the meantime, how do you look at the whole idea of food addiction as a disease and the inheritability of that, the genetic predisposition?
Is that for me? Sure. Okay. Yeah, we definitely know food addicts that don't have any relatives that appear to be food addicted. We definitely have people like me who definitely have quite the lineage. So, I mean, even as a kid, I remember my grandfather would eat like 4 slices of pizza at the counter, like standing up, and he'd be like, "Charlotte, what's for supper?" Charlotte was my grandma. So that was just like, it's just like a kind of normal, but it's definitely inheritable. There's definitely some sort of genetic component, whether we fully comprehend it or not. It definitely runs in lines. I've heard stories of that. Sometimes like alcoholism will skip a generation, and some of those patterns exist in food addiction. Often the younger people that are food addicts will describe a grandmother or a grandfather that was, well, we can't tell them they're food addicts, but they appeared to have behaviors that were related to food addiction. Yeah, it's definitely, it's definitely a worry, especially based on the current food environment, which is like a breeding ground for addiction. It's awful. And, and I think right now, I mean, at least for my role in like the low carb movement, and to use that as a tool in treating food addiction, just one tool. There are tons of tools, but just one tool. And that we're fighting against the dietary guidelines, which essentially tell people that it's okay to eat anything in moderation, which I explain, like moderation is the great mythical unicorn. You know how like Bigfoot is blurry at best? Like that's what moderation is. I don't know many people that can actually moderate. I think they can. They think that their snacking is moderate, but usually it's not. But that's the food environment. And so we're fighting these guidelines, and the guidelines don't have scientific backing to support them. Quite the opposite, but still, it's a shame. So there's definitely a part of it. And so if you put it just like if you took a scientific experiment and you took a rat and you put him in a maze with all this crap in it, they're going to eat it. If you put a kid around all this stuff, eventually they're going to eat it. And a lot of them will manifest cravings, or they'll at least manifest irritability when they don't get it, So that kind of sounds like withdrawal, doesn't it?
So Judy, when you have two children and who might be experiencing withdrawal symptoms, did you notice that they were irritable? Did you notice that they were food-seeking entities?
I don't believe that I did from that standpoint. I was naive, I think, because I didn't know what I didn't know, So it wasn't what stood out to me, I didn't know David was taking food from the pantry downstairs. I thought it was the babysitter. I had no clue. I didn't know. It's interesting. My daughter shared with me that she would go to parties that she had when she was, coming of age, 12, 13, with her, and she would go and they'd have these big affairs with dinners and whatever. And she would always not eat there and then come home and eat. I didn't know that till later on. Like I didn't see that behavior. I didn't think anything of it. I think she was probably uncomfortable in those social situations, and that was her way of protecting herself. I don't know for sure, because when you ask David about the, I believe that we do have sensitivity, gene sensitivity, but I think it depends on your environment, whether it's when it's going to come out or whether it will come out. And I'll give you an example. I think if you live in a family where nutrition's very important and the parents don't serve any kind of junk or whatever, then, you grow up with that's your food. So you don't think about, like gorging, or it doesn't stimulate maybe the genetic stuff. Okay. That's kind of, or I've seen from clients, what can precipitate all of a sudden eating is a traumatic event. Like I think they were predisposed to it before, and that brought it forward. I can think of somebody I know who I've worked with that, some people diet all their lives to maintain the food addiction piece. And then when we do something called the sugar instrument, which David and I and you, Cindy, are certified and licensed in, you can actually see the pattern that very young, sugar was an issue to that person, but it doesn't show up in their body type because they kept their weight off by maybe by exercising, maybe being an exercise bulimic, and working hard at that. And then all of a sudden, when it shows up for a woman, when it's those hormonal changes of the change of life, hugely impact people. And I think that's also when it's precipitated in young people, when they're changing, when women are changing and their bodies are changing, puberty is occurring. And it probably is for a male too, that hormones make a huge difference. So I think there's lots of pieces to the puzzle. David shared on some, and I too feel the high fructose corn syrups nowadays. I mean, I'm reading a book now by Kessler. Food has been made to tantalize, to stimulate every single sense that you have in your body. And they layer, even the stuff you think you're going to have a piece of chicken of that's clean is layered with fat and sugar and fat and salt. Before it gets finally put on your plate, because very little is made within a restaurant, fast food chain, and even ones that you don't think are fast foods, they're made elsewhere, and that's how they preserve it to come to you. So I think that it's sad. It's sad because I look outside and I see toddlers, really young kids and a little bit older, who are really being diagnosed with fatty liver disease now, which is totally related to the sugar, metabolic syndrome. We all look at, people talk about having diabetes. Well, heart disease, high blood pressure, it's all related not to cholesterol and fat. We're finding out more and more, and I know this is controversial, but boy, the more reading I do, it's related to sugar and probably the high fructose corn syrups and the bad fats we've been eating that come from plants that are poisonous, like rapeseed oil, anyway, canola. You really have to start, thinking about what are you putting in your mouth, because it's a real detriment, and we're seeing it around us. And this is the first generation, they say now, coming up that will not outlive their parents because of it. And it makes me so sad, but I'm so grateful that my kids have found solutions, that they understand this stuff and will be around for their kids to watch them grow. So.
Thank you, Judy. You've raised some issues. Could each of you talk a bit about codependency and about how it feels to be a parent who may be transmitting genetically this and may have received from others this food addiction? And then how does the codependency work with that, or in all just social situations? Maybe those are two different topics.
So the first thing I'll do is I'll give the definition that I like of codependency, so people kind of know where I'm coming from. So I use this a lot with my clients, and it's focusing on anyone else's problems more than your own. So I like that because it's not too technical and people understand that, I think, really well. I think that I don't know how much codependency I really had. There are elements of it, definitely. There were elements of me as a result of, I always had a kid. I always had an IEP, I always had help in the classroom, in the school, but I definitely used that so I didn't have to do too much work. So because I'm lazy or I was lazy.
Just to interject, that's individualized education program plan for people who don't know. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. Right. Yes. Thank you. So I had a learning disability, so then I had resources to help me, right? But I think I leaned a lot on the resources, especially in high school, and didn't apply myself to the degree that I could have. So yeah, that's codependency, right? So definitely being really clingy with my folks. I mean, for a while, I would say my dad was my best friend. You know, for a long time, it was easier than putting myself in social situations where I could get hurt. So yeah, that's that too. Yeah. And then as a dad, I think certain decisions that I make or see other people make in regards to my child, either I'm being somewhat codependent or I'm like, so I don't want to be codependent. So like I take other actions. Like I try not to rescue my daughter all the time, you know, let them learn. But yeah, that's a line, you know, as a parent, it's hard. It's definitely really hard, especially as a new parent. But it's, you know, it's kind of like, I think when the first parent, your first child, you're like picking everything up and dusting off the floor. By the time you're on your third kid, you just let them eat dirt. You know, it's just like, you just know that it's not worth the effort. So that's kind of where I'm at. Now, that was the codependency part of the question. What was the other part of the question?
I've already forgotten it. Judy, do you want to take that?
Sure. Sure. I just think of, you know, David alluded to, you know, both my kids had IEPs. Both of my kids had, it's so interesting. I had one who was a strong auditory learner and one who had auditory processing problems. I had one who was ADD and one that was ADHD. So it was a balancing act for me. Thank goodness. I mean, I say this, that I was abstinent when I found out my daughter, who was the oldest, had issues, because I had just started my recovery. What a gift that was, I believe, so that I could start to be present. I mean, it was scary stuff as a parent when I had somebody say, well, I think we should try, you know, chemicals to, you know, help da 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 da. And I was like, oh my God, they're talking about my 7-year-old, you know? So, I mean, I can say I was codependent with them. I mean, I protected them, but at the same time, I also think I healthily, very healthfully advocated for them. And my kids went to a private Jewish day school, and most therapists would say, you can't do that with these kind of kids, because not only you're getting one language, you're getting two languages. Not only getting one curriculum, you're getting two. And fortunately, I had a gift in my life, a psychologist who said, after going to the school, said to me, there's 3 things I want to tell you. One, I have never met a group of teachers that care so much about your child. Number 2, whatever you're doing, keep doing. I'll never forget this, because they all love you and they feel like, you know, they have your back and your kids' back, you know, because of that. And 3 was, your kids are going to the best school they could possibly be going to because of all of that. And this was a psychologist who's well known now. And also he had done his thesis in knowing good teachers and bad teachers, because he doesn't believe there's a bad kid. He believes they're bad teachers, okay? So that brings to mind that. But as they got older and I continued in my recovery, David, you should speak about your trip abroad, because I think that's very telling. I didn't know that until you shared that on another podcast. So I think you should refer to that. But also that, you know, I saw my daughter having lots of problems because of her addiction. And I had someone come to me and say, do you realize she might die, da, 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 da. And I looked at them and said, and what would you like me to do about it? Because I can't control what another person does. As much as I love her to pieces, and she was like my best friend at times in my life. And we've gone through relationships where then we diverted and like she barely talked to me. But now with a baby and having a spouse and being older, we're very close again in a very nourishing, positive, not a codependent way, you know, because she's recovered and I've recovered. And so we're able to, you know, meet each other. And same thing with David, you know, like I don't tell anybody what to do. And if my kids come to me, usually I'll say, well, you'll figure it out. Like, you know what's going on better than I do. You'll figure it out. Or I'll say, do you want my opinion, or are you looking for guidance? You know, because I don't want to get in their face, because I like the relationship I have today. And you know what? I don't want to take their garbage on, because it rocks my serenity and my abstinence. I mean, it makes me uncomfortable inside, because whenever I'm uncomfortable, I feel it in my gut. My gut has a big black hole that wants to get filled. So take it from there.
Thank you, Judy. Do you want to put something in about that trip, David?
Yeah, I'm kind of wondering what she wants me to put in.
Well, the difference, because I wasn't
Oh yeah, so
abstinent
I
before,
went.
and what
Yeah,
happened?
okay. I traveled to Israel for 9 months between high school and college. And so anyway, so my parents came to visit me during Pesach or Passover, which is like around April. It's more or less around the time of Easter, right? So so they came for 10 days. I hadn't seen my mom. This was April. I hadn't seen her since maybe August, late August. So it was quite some time. So first of all, my sister was with us, who happened to be ill at the time, dealing with like a lot of things. And the first thing I noticed was my mom was calm, like under like great duress. Like, here we are, there's four of us, we're in another country, there's another currency, there's another language, there's a lot of cultural diversity there and adversity. Yeah, so she was just handling herself really well, you know. Not to mention that she like looked much different than when she left. But there was like major, let's say, stuff. There was a lot of stuff going on between my sister's illness. I was having some issues with the school I was going to at the time. There were some things that she wasn't going to be able to handle until she was home. And she did them. She said she'd go home and deal with them, and she went home and dealt with them. And that's what abstinence looks like, and that's what recovery looks like. Like, there's a line that says we would be able to handle situations that used to baffle us, you know, and that's like how I describe what recovery is for people. Like, you are going to be in a situation that you would have had no ability to handle, and you will handle it with grace and dignity, and that's what strong recovery looks like. So I think that's what she was referring to when she was asking me to talk about my trip.
Thank you, Dave. So the question that I'd forgotten was about that sense of, I passed on my genes to another. I received genes from somebody and I passed them on to somebody.
Sure.
How does it feel?
Yeah. So let me tell you, if you ever want to play real Russian roulette, have a baby. So, because you think you know what your genetic information is, you have no idea. So I think, like, I just kind of look at it that way. I know that here's me, here's my wife, I have recessive and I have dominant genes, and you just don't know what's going to happen with those two. And that's one of the cool things about having a baby, like, and watching, like, it looked like me, now it looks like her, and now it looks like me again, you know, or like in different situations. It seems like she looks like me when she's getting into trouble. We won't get into that, but that's just the way it is. And so you're taking, it's like, you ever seen Texas Hold'em poker and they go all in? Because that's what it's like. You just don't know what you're going to get. So I learned to look at addiction like it's a disease, that it's not my fault, but it's my responsibility. And I know if my daughter, and I have another one coming too, so I know that if my daughter, if I can maintain my recovery, you know, I can be level-headed under pressure, that they're likely going to come to me, hopefully, if they are having a problem. And with my knowledge and experience, I'm either going to guide them or get them to someone that can. And so I think that's the biggest asset. It's like, a college doesn't teach you much. It just teaches you where to look for things, right? So that's kind of my approach to it. And I don't think feel personally responsible. I think I will have a lot of empathy, but I think if it does happen, I'll feel partially responsible, but I'll be able to work through that, because I know that, like, I'm powerless over that. There's nothing I could have done differently. that would have changed anything. It would just be guilt and remorse, and I lived with that for a long time, and I can tell you honestly, it's a waste of time.
Thank you, Dave. Judy, do you want to put anything in there?
Yeah, just to say that obviously my kids are grown, and you have one of them right in front of you, and he's a good person. He's an upstanding citizen. You know, every person, not kid, every person has their assets and liabilities to any trait that they have. And I don't live with like, oh, my poor kids are food and sugar addicts because of me. I can't take that on. I'm not God. I'm not the universe. That's what they were dealt with. But as a parent, I dealt with what they were dealt with, and I'm so grateful that I found my recovery. I mean, I was blessed right when I really needed it to be there to help them, you know. And as I've said before, I can't control anybody. I can't make anyone do anything they don't want to do. The only person Judy can change is Judy. That's what I've learned, and that's what I believe. Yeah, once I knew that they had a problem, I could be there, make suggestions if they wanted, you know, but never tell anybody what to do. And I think it's very painful for a parent to watch a child, what we call take the helium treatment, to blow up like a balloon, you know, and it's right in front of you, and not judge, because I think we're a very judgmental society on looks. I think that that's a big deal. And to not judge, and to know that this is truly a problem that the person has no control over. And to accept that is very difficult, I think, for a parent, especially. I mean, it's difficult enough for me, knowing the little bit I knew then when I saw that happen to my daughter. But to not have any knowledge and any base with that, I think of the pointing of the finger and how sad it is and how detrimental it is for the child. And, you know, I always say you got to find a dietitian or nutritionist like David who understands the difference between abstinence and moderation, because you know what? There are very few dietitians out there, and people, you know, want to moderate, and you're treating the wrong disease. That's what's so great about that sugar instrument. It tells you whether you're a pathological user, a food addict or sugar addict, or a harmful user, someone who has an eating disorder. They're two different ballparks, and you need to be treated differently. So I can't take on the onus that I gave my kids food addiction. Oh, well, you know, but I can take on the onus of being present and being responsible today to be able to help if they have questions. That I can do. And I'm not going to feed, just so you know, and David knows this, I'm not feeding my grandchildren things that I don't put in my body. It's very difficult. It's a hard world out there. You know, although there was a Jewish holiday that my daughter actually asked me to make a certain cookie with the kids, and with COVID, it never happened. I made the dough, but we never went through with it. But her daughter doesn't eat any of that stuff. Her daughter, well, and Gabrielle's, her daughter doesn't eat any of that stuff either. I mean, because she won't give her daughter, you know, sugary types of products. So at least not yet. I mean, so, you know, time will tell, but I'm not that responsible. I just don't have that power over anybody.
Oh, thank you, Judy. Thank you both. I would just like to ask just a quick, what is it that you would say to parents? What's your wisdom to share with a parent who has a kid that they may consider to be a food addict? The possibility is there. Or an addict parent, either an alcoholic or a gambler or a food addict or drug addict, on down the list. What would you say to these people in terms of food and their children?
I think you need to find people that have been through this process and who have done well. So, you know, and you may not be able to help your child, but that doesn't mean that someone else can't. and someone else can connect with them. It's very easy for an addict to connect with someone else who's an addict. It's just like give me 45 seconds and I can convince them that I'm just like them, because that's my truth. And so I think that's one of the best ways for me. I think it's so hard. It's so hard to control the environment. You can control the home, but it's limited. I'm huge in the community piece. I think we need people around us that are like us. And I think that for even the kid to just know that there's someone else that can explain or can relate to their experience, or just tell them their story, and they can relate to that experience of, why did I do that? I knew I shouldn't have done that, and I did it anyway. And someone can tell that over and over again, because that's experience of active addiction. Like, we know, but we do it anyway. And so I think that finding some kind of community that can support or at least connect. And if it's you, and I mean, using that we call, you talk about collateral damage. Like, sometimes we need to use the damage that we're inflicting on others so that we can help ourselves. So, my eating, well, it doesn't really affect me, but does it affect your kid? And if you think it doesn't, think again, because it definitely does.
Thank you, Dave. Judy?
I just want to say that, all I can do is be a walking power of example in my whole community, whether it's kids or otherwise, because I've been asked by kids, like they'll offer me something, I'll say, no, I don't eat sugar, and I explain, if they ask me, I'll explain, because it makes me sick that, I blow up like a balloon, and I don't feel good about myself, that kind of thing. But I just have to add, because it's not something that was mentioned, is the denial that's rampant in our society. I mean, I have friends who I know are food addicts because of their behavior, because I've seen them yo-yo up and down and up and down, up and down. And you know what? I can't say anything. Unless somebody comes to me in many ways, again, it comes back to all I can be as a power of example, because they've seen, I mean, in my community, my social community, I mean, I can remember being the heaviest most of my life. And today, with the, I'm an older person, with the spread that's occurred, I'm the thinnest. My weight does not change. If anything, I've lost weight recently, even though my hormones have certainly changed. And, so denial is rampant. I mean, rampant. People so love their food and are so entrenched in the food, and it's the surround sound around us from advertising all over, and the products on the shelves. And I mean, even now you go to the vegetable aisle and they have crap there. It's unbelievable. It's not even safe there anymore. But, so that denial is big, and I can't fight that unless somebody comes to me and wants to know what to do. So I don't have an answer for you.
Thank you, Judy. I think that there were a lot of answers in this particular experience. I'd just like to thank both of you very sincerely for participating in this, being a part of getting more information out to people so that they can know what it is that is happening with food addiction. And Judy and David, both of you are really wonderful examples of the benefits that come from freedom from food addiction. And that comes with abstinence rather than moderation, as has been said a number of times. So one last thing, it's foodaddictioninstitute.org. We accept donations if you would like to offer them in the name of someone, or just come be a subscriber, and you're welcome to give a monthly subscription, even a very small amount, or large. So come join us on foodaddictioninstitute.org and see the other Food Addiction Institute YouTubes, the other testimonials that are there, and keep striving for abstinence from drug foods, trigger foods, as opposed to moderation of those. And you may be surprised. Thank you so much, Judy Wolfe and Dave Wolfe. Trigger Free Nutrition is the website for Dave, and Judy is available at Judy, FAC coach. Say the
FA
rest.
coach.
FA coach.
Judy FA coach.
Thank you. Stands for food.
Gmail.com.
All right. Thank you all, and come back and see us the next time. Thanks. Thank you, everyone.